Stillborn to Life, a novella by Ballerina Stevens. Chapter 11. My last semester of my third year at university, I found myself slipping into madness again. Or was it the womb of God, a soft, slow ascent? I would often pray to him that I wouldn't flood out, then to be pulled under by the weighty elements of this mystical undertow in such states of humane extreme. For the mundane senses often merely mocked my cowardly compliance with promises of the supposed absolutes, of words, sight, sound, sense, over-recited theorems, and overrated conceptions. And oh, how that deviant, imbecilic tongue tastes of that sweet yet tart cherry juice, yet erupts that mystery pit with such haste at the slightest feel and texture astray from what it has been lashed to disarray in abstemious paralysis to savor. And oh, how that impulsive, irretractable arm shuts that window with such irascible scorn to quiet the nagging drone of the wind, as its brother ear fails to hear that it is the soft, whispering murmur of a praying child from across the hall. And oh, how that shape-seeking eye wishes that what it has seen could but only have preceded what it has merely read, or heard, or watched countless mouths squander away with inadequate, profane enunciation and denunciation. And if only the haphazard heart knew that what it believes is true. And if only the hedonistic nose and skin could begin again anew, unmitigated by convention, perhaps then would the human mortal know where true madness multiplies, overpopulating the society of the soul with its overbearing antics of pseudo-sustenance and rhetoric rage. For it has become all too common in this day and age to see all while sensing nothing but those whims which seek to cultivate feelings of only nullity and perplexity. Yes, it is all too common in this day and age to feel the sensate organism ravaged and even enraptured, as the true feeling and experience still remains to be measured at a mere 1 degree skin deep. This is the cry of the born yet unborn, having everything and yet wanting nothing, and even less than that, for having nothing is having nonetheless. This is why so many embrace nihilism, for they know of the secret. Freedom can be found only in negation. For they wish not to be awoken upon the dark side of morn, to find themselves gratified beyond all satiety, yet betrayed by what has been pillaged from them. For in daring to find fulfillment, the heart risks all kinds of thievery being wrought upon it. Yet we also cannot give continual way to a reeling, disconcerted saunter back into womb reminiscent oblivion, without exacting the costs of that. For here is where the price is much steeper, as the thief of one's wares is one's very self. Yet this is how we all used to be, blissfully ignorant, our soft, plasmatic minds ever flowing like the font of youth at the calloused feet of our guardians. Yet we all quickly learn to see just how systematically we are drunk dry. And I fear, should I succumb to this yearning to return to inscience, that I would never achieve that full prescience which was the life goal of every human soul. Yet, as it is written in the equation, hope, which to most was self-preservatory, for others such as myself, turned easily self-injurious, even potentially annihilative, For the source of my vitality was often mistaken for hope, but was merely derived from my hunger, and passion is not always a virtue. Yet every metamorphosis is by nature a very painful one. The being throbs in the pit of the bowels, beneath which some long ago forgotten fruit toils and spoils, for want of a better place to rest, save upon the castigating bosom of fear. Then the total dismemberment of the only fists which exist to pound through the thickened membrane of the battered soul, freeing it into a body anew, so that one may finally wield fruits to overflowing. Hence, fear must be tamed by courage, and my inmost personage tended with due care, so that my entity was not left to rot beneath mere flesh, bone, trembling tendon, and an intellect having grown effete, and a heart indifferent. For I had bade the devil to enter, and he would not leave. Yet for what love had been lost, had terror been transposed in macabre measure down to the crusty crux of my frail, iniquitous, fleshly ghost, leaving a residue cruelly and compliantly fixed. And what my mind failed to grasp, my soul sweetly demystified through the slow but sure ab-reaction of implosive transgression, as I fell into a stunning trance of unruly lucidity and extrasensory intuition. The shadow followed me wherever I needed no light to grant it its substantiality or form. And yet, despite my breach of such higher integration, I still felt on the verge of psychotic immersion in frenzy, as the complex architecture of hypocrisy and self-loathing began to construct themselves, housing the time-space causation of an endless void, echoing remnants of humanity lost. And as I floated about, rising and falling with languid stupidity through the cold, damp air of the confines of this human experience, I found truth again only when I realized that this waking life was merely a lucid dream to which we all must learn to fall asleep. And I would try to find this same so-called madness in others' eyes and wonder just how many could see the cogency in mine. Maintaining my jeopardy, I enjoyed hating as much as loving to love and to be loved in return. And I often saw just how irreconcilable was this condition of the human heart, and that it could never be pure or at rest within the contaminant dissonance of such contradiction. Oftentimes, the only mercy we can find in ourselves can be found in the possessive, lulling embrace of apathy. For here, it is almost bearable, to the point where mind, body, and soul become whole, feel at home at last. Yet this was the main concern. The darkness frees. We see not, we are not seen. But what of the light? Oh, the light binds with questions all to answer ready. For here we are inescapably seen. For the road less travailed is not even a road, but a rail, with much less margin for error, though definitely not injury. The path which I followed was both my mediocre triumph and my terror. Life was so much harder after I began to believe in heaven and hell. And I often railed against my faith, against my Creator, like a child to its earthly parents. I did not ask to be born a creature of such fire and sadism. I did not ask to be born the only creature exalted and given a choice, yet who will still not go unscathed and undamned by rebuke and disowning in the hands of this Creator. So, what was the way out? The way out was the way in. What was the way in? The way in was always no way out. And so would I continue to find both a way in and a way out through the only means at my disposal, truth and passion. Most would prefer to die of natural causes, yet we all live irredeemably encumbered by unnatural clauses. Severed from the umbilical cord of the mother, child flourishes, yet all that truly nourishes is prophesied to be cut off from the self by the very self, time and time again. Accountability is shifted as mother and child further and further drift to beach the weathering shores of individuation, where they will both learn of nature, discovering their own nakedness and becoming well schooled in the esoteric language of their own solipsism. Yet they will then frantically try to redress one another with these newfound separately seeing eyes, only to find that they no longer recognize one another, flustering at the breach of the newfound stranger's autonomy. Yet the tides of mother and child shall come and go, ebb and flow, and their moons shall wax and wane, gibbous, to the formulaic law and pull of dissimilar poles denying their dichotomy, thus allowing for the cycle of birth plus weaning plus severance plus death equals rebirth plus weaning plus severance plus death to continue on ad infinitum and ad nauseam, and again failing to bring to fathomable fruition a more keen figuration and final order and equilibrium. Yet the greatest tragedy is how such an equation by its very nature abhors the irrational and the chaotic, and will always be in direct opposition to them both. Yet I knew somehow that what most deemed chaos was the most logical pattern to follow, for to those of my kind, chaos was order, the ultimate order. It merely could not be grasped in its infinite complexities and intricacies with the mere intellect. And thus so many became the scapegoats of strict homogeneity and cheap artifice. They slowly allowed themselves to become accomplices to life's many crimes, those justified through eyes of skewered perception, made cataractic by the diseased soul, once crystalline and pure, now all too opaque and clouded. And this is yet another further shadowing of that dark essence, fragmenting what was once whole, as it goads the libido of virtue to remain somnolent and impotent, and thus the inner light of unifying and mollifying depth introspection is obfuscated. And so does the mortal organism become laden with infection, as the promiscuities of life's rough, bare intercourse wreak their consequence, the human experience becoming a little too experienced. Meanwhile, innocence clings to the cold, dry breast of ignorance, who remains a virgin, oppressed and pining away within her whorish chastity, as she yearns to be raped by the engorged phallus of truth, uncensored. And when her hymen is finally penetrated and torn, how the blood does coagulate and curdle on the inside, eventually bleeding itself out to drip that last stain upon the black burlap sheets of necessary corruption. Yet innocence then begs for more, and more, and more, until truth is spent and abandons her like a forlorn lover. Yet she then gives a come-hither wink and nod to deception, waiting his turn in the wings to possess and ravish her. Yet he too flees the sea when she tells him she didn't mean to become leaven with reason's essence, an immortal seed. The child to be born, a child of integration, existent forevermore, ever evolving and revolving in the realm of the Homo sapiens generation. This child, a new life form to breathe while we heave, our faithful child, mother, logic, who will need resuscitation from life only after we have bore death, unnaturally. I had learned of this child, mother, logic, and her saving graces at university. I was doing a double major of art and philosophy, now in my 4th year, after a long, hot summer of attending various cultural events held throughout the provinces of New England. I performed in a few of them and got my share of applause. Performing was like nothing else I had known, and it seemed to keep my baser instincts at bay. My lover and I spent most of the summer together. She was going to be going away at the start of my 4th year, and we still, after all this time, enjoyed a romance of mythic proportions. She was an artist like me, as well as a fine dancer and wordsmith, and we communicated with one another most meaningfully through our artistic and intellectual inclinations. Kieran and I were also still friends, although we had mellowed over the years and did not engage in nearly as many fiendish, tricksterous activities. And as always, I still lived somewhat of a double life, as the idiom goes. No one really knew me, including my lover. Yet I not only preferred to act alone, but also preferred to bear the knowledge of my sins and the brunt of life's vagaries privately. I knew that I would no doubt be executed if my crimes were found out. Yet my upbringing had conditioned me to put that of my own survival above all else, including those things of a higher calling. Yet there was always a boundless, indescribable sorrow sensed within me that no joy could seemingly abolish. And as long as I remained unrepentant for my deeds, the stain would remain and my heart could never be free. I felt that I was everything and yet nothing. Everyone, and yet no one, everywhere and yet nowhere, all at once. And no mirror either could adequately validate with its play upon light and optical nerve that I was truly there, or ever had been. I tried to transcend my quiet hysteria and rise to a roaring existential crescendo of glorious, harmonious opus. Yet it had grown too dim and hushed within my soul. And too, the world without seemed arrested in its vertiginous inertia, which even the loyal persistence of all the heavenly bodies in their succinct, elegant dance of numbers could not rouse to long, purposeful stride and waltz towards heaven's gate. Thus I remained the child of God, but a brother of evil. And I wondered how I could choose a side without betraying my very own flesh and blood and incurring the wrath of both nature and God themselves. For only when armored within the comprehension of them both was I whole. But as a devout servant of just one or the other, I was dangerously split down to the core of one who was always met only halfway by the world. For me, feigned civility and self-abnegation were merely curses disguised as blessings, but most of all, lethal vulnerabilities disguised as safeguards. Father Ralph would often tell me that I could choose either that which comforts yet maims the flesh, or that which frees, preserves, and fulfills the spirit. He said that I must live in the moment, but for eternity. Yet this was a tricky task indeed when one was called both to survive and to live just as spontaneously and religiously in a world that would not let lion lie peaceably with lamb. But Father Ralph would also teach me of true love, true freedom, true fulfillment, and true life in the years to come. I finished my 4th year and graduated with a bachelor's degree in both art and philosophy. I then decided to go on to graduate school and obtain a master's also in both subjects. And even though I was making enough money to pay for my full tuition, the professor and his wife still extended their gracious patronage to me if I so wished to receive it. Yet I wanted to remain as free from any societal obligations to anyone as I could, and so I politely declined their offer. Yet we still agreed to keep in touch and to also travel occasionally together, as we had done. Thus began yet another chapter of my life as I continued to climb my way up from the hell that I had always known to the heaven I had also always known awaited me. My heart was cold and tired, but by far not terminally malaised. It still beat steady and strong to its own hell-bent, or shall I say heaven-bent, rhythms. It was young, in many ways still unsung, though by far already well-schooled in the contradictorial curriculum of the human multilemma and condition. Yet, due to the very essence of mortal life, which is both fickle and vain, there seemed to be no graduation from this arduous education, although I would always hold myself to the same standard of advancement nonetheless. And it was conceit with whom I knew I must sever all ties, for she would only lead me further into dualistic temptation, hence the provocation of never-ending disillusionment and self-estrangement. And I made a note not to mistake her for integrity or righteous lamentation or indignation. For my sorrow was just as legitimate as my optimism, for sanguine nonchalance so often missed the main point in the long-winded lectures of personal refinery. Melancholia is, in actuality, quite a utilitarian state of mind in a world where justice so tirelessly seeks ministration. To everything there was indeed a time, place, and calling, and for now I knew mine. Yes, for now, to everything good would I turn towards, not away.